We're here in Kruger National Park in Pafuri region, and the elephant showed up just for the interview. I'm about to interview Devin Myers. He's been taking us on a walking tour, and I didn't really call the elephant in, I want you to know. It just decided to show up, okay? That was a joke. It's not funny. This is one of the most gorgeous animals on safari in the world. This is why we never poach. We never kill these animals for ivory or anything else. They are so sacred. They are so smart. They're so smart that, they're standing back there for the interview. I mean, how lucky are we? I really feel like I'm one of the luckiest people in the world. Thank you, Devin. You have total confidence that this animal is just sniffing us out.
Yeah, so what's happened is he's heard us chatting here. He's approached from a good distance off. The wind is currently from us onto him. So before he even spotted us, he heard us, he smelt us, and he's just approached our area saying that he's completely happy with us being here. He's made the decision to approach, and at some stage, he's going to make the decision to move off if he feels uncomfortable.
And they're such sensitive animals. They can sense our energy. We're all really calm.
Sure.
We love elephants, but it can sense our energy, right, and our thoughts.
Absolutely. And the key thing to remember is that he belongs in this wilderness, but so do we. And we were in this spot first. So he's approached it. He knows we're here. And at some stage, he's going to make the decision to move on.
Can you give us a little history about how many elephants? We've been seeing tons. One, because it's been so hot, right?
Yeah, we have. We've been seeing a lot of elephants recently. Big bulls like this coming down to the river because of the heat. There he goes, giving us a nice wide berth. Okay. Okay, buddy. Just sussing us out a little bit. We'll just give him a minute to make a decision.
Yeah. Nobody move.
See his trunk, how he's just picking up our scent as our wind's blowing onto him. Okay. Hey. Enough. Hey. Okay, come. Let's go. Come on you go.
Unbelievable, truly unbelievable. I never thought I'd witness this in my life.
Come. He's going to move off pretty soon, I think. We'll just wait for him before we start.
Yeah, don't worry about it. This is beautiful.
The wonderful alien. The most important thing for me is to keep this type of interaction positive. Mm-hmm. We belong here as well. As a species, we evolved in this environment, and he knows that as much as he belongs here. Mm-hmm. So we just need to have a mutual respect for each other and keep things positive. What we never want to do is escalate the situation. Mm-hmm. We want to try and match his reaction for our reaction. So if he takes a few steps forward, we take a step forward, and we just match it. And at some stage, we get that mutual respect, And because we were here first, he'll probably just move on and find another shady tree. Hey! Okay, keep going. Thank you. Good.
Unbelievable.
Lovely big bull, hey? What a magnificent animal.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and there he goes. I think it's important to understand that that's not us disturbing a natural animal in his natural environment and us being a weird species that are disturbing him. That's an interaction as old as time. Yeah, that's us, a species that's always been here, that he knows well, hundreds of thousands of years interacting with him, who's always been here as a species for hundreds of thousands of years.
I think what was so remarkable about what just happened, one, obviously it's so sacred that this beautiful animal showed up. But what I think was so remarkable is that for about, I'd say 30 seconds, I got a little scared. I did.
Sure.
And I had to go immediately in, not just trusting you as a guide, which I've watched you and seen how good you are, is that I had to immediately remind myself exactly of the knowledge that you said. We were here back in time. We come from Africa. And as long as we're respecting the animal and not scared, right? And just honoring it, right? So I just changed my energy and look at, instead of anything horrible happening, which is so rare, as we both know, it was, I don't know if it's a she or he. What
It was a big bull.
It was a big bull decided to give us an incredible display for this interview.
Sure.
I mean, what are the odds? I mean, that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was typically just two species, ourselves, Homo sapiens, and an elephant, that have both naturally occurred in this wilderness since the beginning of time. So
And I was just looking back because I thought maybe we were going to see a leopard again because we've had such great
Sure.
luck.
Yeah, no, that's
okay,
good.
well, I know you have two wonderful guides over here ready. But, you know, the last thing I want to do is end up, you know, putting a bullet into a gun, you know,
Sure. No, you
into an
definitely
elephant.
don't want to, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why we try and keep the
Wow.
interactions positive, calm and relaxed.
Well, we saw you in action.
Sure.
So when the elephant came a little bit closer, there was one moment. The elephant did decide it was going naturally, and then it came right at us,
Yeah.
right? You just stopped it, and you just basically said, no, this is our territory.
Sure.
You know, and that's where it realized.
So the important thing to understand is that the elephant doesn't understand the word no.
Okay.
Like I don't understand what its deep rumblings mean.
Right.
So we can't speak each other's languages, but we can communicate through a body language of sorts. So when he came up and he did that short mock, would be a mock warning or mock charge towards us,
Okay.
his ears came out, he made himself look bigger, and my way of matching that is by putting my arms up and saying, hey. So that's just a little bit of my communication to him saying, yes, we see how big you are, but we're also something to be wary of. So let's stop this nonsense and get over and done with it.
But it's his land in the sense that, like you said, this is completely wild in Pafuri.
Completely.
There's more animals than there are people, human
Sure,
beings.
Sure.
But, so we're on some level, in a respectful way, encroaching on his territory. But you were saying kind of the history of man, he's walking by and there's a mutual respect
Sure.
as long as we're not doing something bad.
I don't think in the simplest form, we're not encroaching on his territory.
Okay?
Remembering that us as Homo sapiens didn't just arrive in these regions 70 years ago when we started bouncing around the big 4x4 trucks looking for big five. Us as a species evolved in Africa, in these wilderness regions. 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens evolved here. And so we have been around in these same wilderness regions on our own 2 feet, existing alongside the other animals that have also always existed here. So we have our place here as much as they do. In the modern world, we've become very disconnected from our place within the wilderness. So we do belong here. We've just forgotten where we fit in.
Fascinating. And it only gets really disrupted. I want to keep this interview really positive and give everybody a reason to come to this magical place. But it only gets really disrupted when people are doing, I mean, I hate saying it's evil to ever kill that sacred animal for its tusk.
Sure.
And why are even people buying ivory?
Sure.
I mean, I thought it's been outlawed for years, but not in the world. There are certain countries that still, without naming them, are still saying it's okay to have ivory.
Look, ivory is...
Yeah.
There's a...
2, 3. Hi, we're sitting here with Devin Myers from African Born Safaris at Pafuri in Kruger National Park. Pretty much the most northern part possible. Oh my God, there's another elephant over there. And we just had the most miraculous interaction. We started the interview and unbelievable bull just went by us. And I want to ask you a couple of questions about that, and then we'll get into the big general interview. One, how did you know it was a bull, and how old do you think it was?
Okay, so generally how we tell a bull elephant from a cow or a female, male from female. Females tend to have quite an angular forehead. It goes out and it comes down. That's looking from a side profile.
Yeah.
Their tusks are also quite a bit thinner. They also have tusks, but they're thinner. And their body is quite a bit smaller. They're probably about 30% less, at least 30 to 40% less in weight and size than a bull. Bull elephants obviously much bigger, as we've said, but a more sloping, rounded forehead, not so angular. And the tusks are definitely thicker on a bull. That was a very big bull.
Yeah, I felt it was big.
He was probably, judging from the thickness of his tusks, the sunken temples that he had, looking a little bit gaunt, and the thickness of the trunk between the tusks, as well as the size of the ears, because like humans, their ears and trunk grow throughout their life. I would say he was probably about a 35 or 40-year-old bull. So he was definitely within breeding age.
Wow. And so we're normally doing a walking safari, and you usually carry a gun, but because we set up for an interview, that was a little bit different. You didn't feel any need to go for the gun. No. We have 2 other assistants over there just in case. And for you, energetically, it felt like, again, we're not going to repeat ourselves from earlier, but energetically, you felt that when it was coming through, you knew how, with all your, how many years of experience? 17 years?
17 years.
Yeah, 17 years of experience, that you didn't need to get your gun and that you could energetically basically speak its language, respect it, and it would move on.
I think the main thing was that elephant smelt us from a distance off before it even came upon the area where we've been sitting. And not only smelling us, but hearing us setting up here. He knew we were here. So he was quite happy to make his way into this area.
And curious. He looked curious.
And he was curious. He just wanted to see us a little bit. And just judging by his body language and the way he came into this, he was quite relaxed. There was no aggression or panicked intent from that elephant. So it was quite a simple situation of just keeping that positive energy between ourselves and that big bull.
But when he started to approach, you didn't think there was any kind of aggressiveness in it?
No, it was purely just sizing up. He was going, I'm big, and we were saying, but we're not so big, but you know what we are. We're a predator that's existed here for a long time, so be wary of us as well. And then there was that mutual respect that took place, 1 or 2 chest out moments for both. Right. And then at some stage he decided, well, it's not worth the trouble, and he moved on. And that interaction we had with that elephant is as age old as time itself. Us as Homo sapiens on this continent have been having those interactions with elephants forever, not just when safari started.
Yeah, and I talk about the families and how they keep them all together. They're very aware of their young, right?
Yeah.
And they're super smart, they're super intuitive.
Yeah.
And they have feelings. They're really an emotional animal, right?
Look, elephants are probably one of the most intelligent animals out here. Generally, the way we measure intelligence in animals is based on the complexity of their social structure. Elephants have a very complex social structure, and we can see this from their behavior. Yeah, absolutely. They do. They communicate a lot between each other with low rumblings. There's a leader of a family group. We call that the matriarch. It's a female that leads a family group. And then you get these big bulls like this that aren't part of those herds or family groups that come around every now and then, possibly a female, an estrus. He'll follow a family group maybe to try and mate with her. Other than that, he likes to be on his own, wandering quietly, drinking water, splashing in the river, feeding on the world's best salad bar.
World's best salad bar.
know.
Well, what is interesting about Pafuri, again, I put this in my stand-up, is that it is completely wild. And
Sure.
these animals go, as you said, through 3 countries, South Africa, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe. So during the really hot times before rain, which is right now in November, you have a great opportunity of seeing the animals go to the river.
Sure.
But the time that you have suggested a lot of people should come is July and August and maybe September. And I want you to talk about, one, what is it like to take that walking safari now versus that time period? And also, again, this total mutual respect that I have seen with watching you on the walking safari, and why someone would want to take a walking safari.
Sure. So, firstly, Pafuri is an interesting region in the fact that it's probably the most biologically diverse part of the wilderness region. Okay, if the Kruger National Park is 2.5 million hectares in size, Pafuri is 25,000 hectares of that, and so that's 1% of the Kruger National Park area. However, 75% of the biodiversity that occurs within the Kruger occurs in the 1% of Pafuri.
Wow.
So it's an extremely special place. With regards to timings, time of year, generally walking safaris are best in the dry season, which would be winter. So anywhere from about April to beginning mid-November. That's our dry season there. And that's because it's no fun to walk through the rain all day. And also, the drier the region gets, the more the animals flock towards the last remaining water sources, last naturally remaining water sources, the Luvuvu River or any of the large inland wetlands that occur here. So, yeah, that's a good time of year to come on walking safari.
Okay, and why would you do a walking versus the Jeep tour? Because everybody wants to see the big 5.
Sure.
And this place, and I've been very fortunate to be on safari a bunch of times, is for me the most special place I've ever been on safari. So tell us the differences if someone's going to book a trip.
Look, Jeep safaris are fantastic. The vehicle safaris are great. Because you're within the protection of the vehicle, and in certain regions where a lot of vehicle safaris take place, animals have become habituated to the presence of human beings sitting calmly in that vehicle, which means you can get really, really close up for great photographic opportunities from the vehicle in a safe way. However, it's not necessarily our most natural medium. We've only been in the vehicles for the last 60 or 70 years. However, prior to that, for hundreds of thousands of years, we've been on our own 2 feet. It's our most natural way of exploring the wilderness. And so we don't always get as close to the animals on foot as you would in the vehicle, but it gives you
That's good.
Yeah, but it does definitely give you a very different sense, in my mind, a much more natural, visceral, wilderness connecting experience is to be had on foot.
Yeah, and in Pafuri, you were saying you can see 150 elephants all at a time.
Yeah,
right?
there's loads.
Yeah, and so I've been to Masai Mara. Why would you want to come? I've loved South Africa, I
Sure.
have to say. I think it's a very special place. The medical, the safety,
Sure.
it just is a very safe place. Tell us why you would go to Masai Mara versus South Africa, because you've been a guide all throughout these game reserves here as well. You've traveled by car all throughout Africa, which
Sure.
is remarkable. What would be the positives in both places?
Look, East Africa, being Tanzania and Kenya, is fantastic. I lived there for a number of years, guiding walking safaris as well in East Africa. And I spent a lot of time in the Serengeti, as well as the Ngorongoro Crater regions, Lake Manyara, all of them. They are fantastic safari destinations. They really are. It's a wildlife spectacle that needs to be seen. And it's brilliant. But all places are brilliant. And South Africa is one of the places that's extremely diverse. Not only do we have Pafuri and the rest of the Kruger National Park that forms part of a much larger open wilderness, unfenced open wilderness system, but there's also Zululand down on the east coast. There's the west coast, in the northwestern parts of South Africa where it goes into Namibia. There are fantastic places all over southern Africa. Just over our border here is Zimbabwe. Just to the east is Mozambique. To the north and west is Botswana. And they are all phenomenal safari destinations. I would say as a keen...
But you chose Pafuri. This is where you want to be, having done all these other places.
Yeah. Look, I think Pafuri for me is just it's extremely diverse, and we also have a great opportunity here where we can walk and bring our guests in and enjoy this place for exactly what it is. The other thing I love about Pafuri is that it's an ancient wilderness. We can only describe it as Jurassic.
Well, like this tree behind us.
Exactly.
You said it's 900 years old.
Probably 700 years, somewhere in that region.
And then when we're seeing the elephants, usually when you see them on safari, the trees aren't as tall.
Sure.
The elephants actually look somewhat small under these
It
huge
is
trees.
exactly one of those things. So if you go to a lot of other game reserves or other wilderness regions, elephants are massive animals, biggest land mammal in Africa, okay, or biggest land mammal in the world, should we say. They tower over most of the habitat around them wherever else you are. However, here in Pafuri, it's one of the few places where this massive elephant is completely dwarfed by the magnitude of this environment.
Unbelievable. I want to talk about conservation. So we started to touch into about poaching, which for me is just so tragic that any country would accept ivory or will allow it at all.
Sure.
Talk about where poaching is today and how our dollars from around the world coming to South Africa or any place on safari helps conserve and preserve these animals.
Sure. Look, poaching is a major issue. It's been happening for a very long time, and there's different types of poaching. One is what we call subsistence poaching, which is a local person from a community living on the outskirts of a wilderness area needing to get meat for his family. So maybe setting up a snare or a trap to catch
For
a
like
warthog
impala.
or an impala. That's been happening for a very long time. Long before us Europeans arrived in Africa, local people have been eating the food around here. Long before we had cows and sheep and chickens, this was the food source.
Okay.
So that subsistence poaching is one thing we try and curb as much as possible, especially because with the growing populations of communities, the poaching is now getting beyond a manageable number or manageable level for the wilderness around us. There is a different type of poaching that is much more serious though, and it's the commercial poaching. This is poaching where it's the only gain is financial gain. It's a greed form of poaching. It's not meat to put in the belly, it's cash to put in the pocket. And that's where things like ivory or rhino horn or pangolin scale or any of these
Or
things.
even a lion. I
Even
mean, lion's
lion
mane.
bone used in some countries. So the basic thing of poaching is that there's a commodity that is very sought after, and the supply of that commodity is very low and diminishing. And because of that, the demand versus the supply, the cost or the price paid for these types of commodities is high, which means the poaching syndicates that are involved are just like a drug ring anywhere in the world. It's a major crime organization. When tourists come to Africa or come to these places to enjoy, their dollars and a large portion of those dollars goes directly into the anti-poaching, the security operations that are funded through tourism. And those security operations are boots on the ground, intelligence gathering, working with communities, and trying to curb the scourge of poaching that we're currently seeing.
And aren't all of the animals dwindling? I mean, in Africa right now, this
Sure.
is so much.
One of the most major regions that we're losing animals in Africa, poaching is one of the reasons, but poaching is generally the larger commercial stuff. So it's rhino horn and it's elephant tusk and it's pangolin ivory and it's certain things. However, one of the biggest loss to biomass of mammals in Africa and birds and other natural species that occur is actually the loss of wilderness habitat. Okay.
Like what's gone on in Madagascar.
Exactly.
It's tragic.
And it's going on in Africa. So what
They're not
happens is,
rebuilding the forest.
well, basically, the wilderness area that's left is not a lot. Okay, it's much smaller than it used to be, all these wilderness areas, and now they've actually separated from each other. With a growing population of people, of humans on this planet, it's a very basic thing of if it pays, it stays. There needs to be some financial gain or benefit to a wilderness area to keep it wild. Otherwise, it's just going to become cropland or farmland for the growing population of local people. So what we actually need is loads of tourists coming in, enjoying these areas, putting their dollars into them, because as long as there's dollars coming in, there is financial benefit to it, which means that the wildlife and these wilderness areas that are home to these animals and these birds and pretty much everything else, the diversity of it continues to exist.
I can't stress enough for you to travel to Africa and how safe we feel. COVID just literally ruined so many travel businesses, and it's just picking up again. And I feel like it's so safe. I've always felt it safe in Africa.
Sure.
I mean, obviously the safe parts, but that from a cleanliness, it's clean. The food is outstanding at Pafuri Camp.
Yeah.
All these camps. So, I mean, people here in Africa go out of their way to make sure it is as safe and as clean so that everybody can travel here.
Absolutely. And I think the most important thing to understand is that we wouldn't be booking safaris for our guests or our clients in areas that are dangerous or at a time where it's dangerous. We wouldn't be putting them at risk. Not only is it bad for our business, but it's bad for tourism, which in turn is bad for conservation.
Right.
If we want the conservation model to survive and animals to exist in these areas for many generations to come, it's important that we keep people safe within it. And it is a super, super safe thing to be doing.
Absolutely, 100% agree. And that's why we're going to go to Uganda with you. We're going to see the gorillas.
Sure.
And what is the other monkey we're going to see?
Or you can see chimpanzees.
Yeah, chimpanzees.
Yeah, so
We're
gorillas exist in the Burundi forests, and then the chimpanzees in the Chibali forest region of Uganda. And it's absolutely brilliant. There's other national parks in Uganda that we'll see while we're there as well.
Yeah,
So
and then
there's-
we're going to see Namibia with you.
Yeah, Namibia, sure.
Let's talk about that we saw a leopard.
Sure.
And I keep on mixing it up with the cheetah. Talk about where the cheetahs are in South Africa, the leopards and the different types of leopards, and how you usually don't see lions here, because that makes people feel a little bit safer about the walking tour.
Okay, sure. Can I go back
Yeah.
on that a bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
So what we'd like people to know is that Pafuri is actually a lion region, because it is. Naturally, this is the best lion habitat in the world. And I don't want to touch too much because it was poaching that pushed lion out of the area.
Oh.
And I don't want to
Encourage.
highlight that as much.
Yeah.
But it is a natural area, so we can talk about what we can see here.
Okay.
If you want.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Then
Go
we won't.
ahead. Yeah.
We won't talk about the lions. Let's talk about how we
Leopards
saw.
and- yeah.
So we saw a leopard last night,
Sure.
and it was one of the most exciting things. And part of my camera team went out on another day when I
Yes.
was busy working, and they saw a leopard.
Yeah.
So talk about how the leopard sightings are rare, but also how cheetah is very different here versus down in the southern part of Kruger National Park.
Okay, sure. So basically, there are leopards all over Africa. It's probably the most abundant wild cat in Africa. However, they're very rarely seen, not because there's not a lot of them, but purely just because they're quite shy and secretive. In certain regions of the Kruger National Park or certain wilderness areas, there are more safaris taking place, so a higher concentration of safari vehicles over a number of years. Leopards in those regions have habituated to the presence of safari vehicles. So like the Sabi Sands, for instance, is one place where we know it's famous for its leopard viewing. 99% of leopard that occur there are very habituated and relaxed. So if the safari vehicle's coming along, the leopard will just stay walking along the road which it was, or along the game trail that it was walking on, or through the bush, and it will allow that safari vehicle to get within close distance and view it. However, here in Pafuri, there are many, many leopards, as well as same as anywhere else. The big difference is that these leopards in this region have not had the high impact of safari activity. They are still a very wild leopard. So to see a leopard in Pafuri is just that much more special in some ways, because you're seeing a leopard that usually doesn't want to have a safari vehicle around. Those are baboons shouting.
Okay, I'm sorry. I
They
don't
might
mean to
have
be
seen a
distracted.
leopard. You hear that?
Yeah.
That's baboon shouting alarm calls. They could have seen a leopard walking somewhere by the river right now as we
So
speak.
they know that there's a predator.
They've seen it, and they're shouting to all the other baboons saying, careful, there's a leopard here. Other animals don't necessarily speak baboon, but they know that that's an alarm call, and that'll alert them as well to a predator.
And I've noticed when the birds start going like insane, it almost feels like New York City here.
Yeah, sure.
The New York City of animals, because all of a sudden they must know that something's coming near their nest.
Yeah. So especially if you're in the bush and it's like midday when birds are usually quiet because it's hot, and you hear them getting very active and doing a lot of alarm calling, gets very busy, you can be sure there's a snake somewhere close by they've probably seen.
Wow.
They've probably seen a snake moving around. Often in these regions, it's an African rock python, which is a really large snake, or possibly even a black mamba.
Which is really important to talk about. That was my first question.
Sure.
I didn't want to do a walking safari because I was worried. I'm not at all. Talk about how snakes don't attack you on walking safari and why.
Sure. So snakes don't really have ears like we do, but they sense vibration through the ground. When you're walking through the bush, our vibration of our footsteps generally pushes snakes away before we encounter them. They feel our vibration coming, and if they're lying on the pathway that we're currently walking somewhere up ahead, they'll move off the bush, or move off into the bush, should I say.
So you don't have to worry about snakes.
No, you really don't have to worry about snakes too much on a walking safari.
I also noticed, maybe it's because it's hot, because we're in November, there aren't a lot of bugs. And you're not really worried about malaria either. I mean, some people take malaria pills, which I did for years when I went. I don't. I just do mosquito spray.
Malaria is very much a seasonal thing. It is possible to get it in the winter and the dry season, but generally mosquitoes breed in stagnant water, and it's only one species of mosquito that hosts or carries that malaria virus. Okay, so generally it's the summer period after a lot of rainfall, where there's a lot of stagnant puddles, that we get a lot more mosquitoes.
Okay.
Outside of that, we haven't had rain yet this season. The rains are obviously going to arrive quite late. We can see that. And so at the moment, there's very few mosquitoes and very few bugs. Once that rainfall arrives, though, sometime December, January, February, that's when we're going to see a massive increase in the mosquito numbers, as well as in the all the other insects that come out once the rain arrives. And malaria is a risk. It is a slight risk. It's usually only a risk, though, when it goes untreated. So we don't take malaria prevention here because we live here. And you can't take those preventions for prolonged periods of time. It's not good
for the body.
Exactly. So what we do is, if we in this region living here start to feel headaches, fevers, pains, sore body, pretty much a hardcore flu symptom without the coughs, maybe a bit of upset stomach, we know then we could possibly have it. We'll do a finger prick test, a blood test, or go to the doctor for a blood test. And if it is malaria, then we will take a course of medicine that fixes it pretty quickly.
Yeah, and that's, again, why I feel so safe. Let's talk about, in our last few minutes, the walking safari. So when you're walking, what do you ask your guests to do? Just give us the short version of why they feel so confident they can walk in the wild with you.
Sure. So generally on a walking safari, we tend to walk in silence whilst we're moving. We do stop every now and then to chat about things or to look at something interesting, and then we talk quietly. But as soon as we start moving, we just fall silent. We generally walk in single file. So our profile to the areas we're approaching or animals we're approaching is much more narrow and less aggressive looking than a big group. So we walk in single file. We tend to use our senses a lot. Remember, we evolved on this continent using our ears, our eyes, our nose to smell, hear, and see things. Our eyesight and hearing and nose is actually really good. We've just forgotten how to use it. So on a walking safari, for instance, if we hear the call of an oxpecker, which is the bird that sits on buffalo very often, and we hear the call of an oxpecker, we'll look up to see where that oxpecker is, and we'll watch it fly. And if it lands 100 meters away behind a thicket, we'll have an idea that it could have landed on a buffalo that we haven't seen yet that's behind that thicket. And using that type of anticipation or preemptive thought processes, as well as the best decision making and good ethics at heart, we generally try and stay really safe on a walking safari.
Yeah, and you haven't used your gun but once, right? And the kind of study that you have to do in order to be one of these walking guides is extensive. I mean, it's like going to Harvard.
Sure.
It's really hard.
The training is extensive. It starts off with an apprenticeship, and the apprenticeship can last 3 to 4 years, maybe more, and then you can become a lead trails guide, and then from there you can become a professional trails guide. The training is quite extensive, but it's not so much difficult as it is just takes a lot of effort. And you've got to be really, really keen on walking in the bush to be able to get through that. It's a massive sacrifice.
To love it.
Yeah, you've got to love it. The other thing is that we spoke about, carrying a rifle. Okay. We do carry a heavy caliber rifle on our walking safaris. It's the best tool we have to protect our clients against an impossible, unavoidable situation. Situations we try and avoid absolutely. Okay. We try and use all of our training, our best decision making and best ethics at heart to make decisions that keep both the animals and our safari guests safe. However, even with all of that, there could be some circumstances that are out of our control. And in those situations, being professional means being prepared. And so we do need to make sure that we are ready for those types of situations. We hope and pray they never happen. But if you walk enough in the bush as a walking safaris guide, it's bound to happen at some stage in your career.
Yeah. And well, again, you feel really safe. I think it's interesting how the birds just stopped.
Yeah.
So we only have a few more minutes. Are there a couple of things that you would like to highlight that maybe our guests or our viewers want to hear? So we only have a few more minutes. So are there a few things that you would like to highlight? And I think it'd be important to talk about the water buffalo versus the African buffalo, because
Sure.
you've seen that on National Geographic,
Sure.
and there's been some errors
Yeah.
with the narrator.
So you will hear in a lot of documentaries, there is some discrepancy in what things are actually called. Africa is not home to a water buffalo. It's home to the Cape buffalo, or African buffalo as we call it.
Which is quite dangerous.
Yeah, they're a different temperament. Water buffalo, which occur in Asia, you're able to actually domesticate and use as a farm type animal. Whereas the African or Cape buffalo, you wouldn't want to try that. They're just not of the same disposition. It's impossible to domesticate them. So here in Africa, we have the African buffalo or Cape buffalo, which is part of the Big Five. And the Big Five are the Big Five not because they're the 5 biggest animals in Africa, but because they're the 5 animals that are most likely to go on the offensive in a dangerous situation for that animal.
Wow.
When feeling threatened.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. There are so many birds here, like the Okavango Delta, where I've been. And this is a whole different type of environment than the Okavango Delta. Birders must love this. This must be paradise for them.
Sure. Pafuri is a birder's mecca. Because of the diversity of habitat, we get many different bird species. So generally in any wilderness region, the more geologically diverse it is, the more flora you would have, the more different types of flora, the more varied habitats. And because certain birds eat different things or live in different places, the more varied the environment and habitat is, the more bird species you will have that occur within those regions.
Amazing.
So Pafuri's got a lot of birds.
In all the interviews I've done in my entire life, I've never been looking at elephants passing by. That's just remarkable. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this interview? It's just your remarkable knowledge. I mean, honestly, I could do an interview with you for 2 hours, if not 3. The amount of information, you're truly brilliant. You just learn so much when you book you as a guide. I feel very lucky to have met you.
I think I'd just like to maybe, I think we've touched quite a bit on why walking safaris are safe. But it's not only safe because we carry a rifle or because of the walking in single file or because of any of this. It's generally a very safe activity because it is our most natural way as a Homo sapien to exist within the environment that we have always naturally existed.
Yeah. And it's so remarkable. I thought I was unwinding now that I've lived in Amsterdam. It doesn't feel like New York City or LA or San Francisco. And then I get to Cape Town and I really thought I was unwinding. I mean, it's just a remarkable city. It doesn't even feel like a city. And then I get here and I realize that my mind was really wound up. And it's not just because of work. It's that we're constantly on Wi-Fi. We're constantly multitasking. And there's something that if everybody could afford, and there's many affordable safaris. You don't have to be wealthy. There is a way to go through Kruger National Park with a permit.
Absolutely.
They may not be as lucky to get you, but basically I find that what nature does here different, and we have beautiful national parks in America, don't get me wrong. There's this unwinding of the mind that it just becomes, again, you're back in the heart of the world because
Sure.
we're from here, and you feel this new kind of perspective
Sure.
and thinking, and just, I don't know, I can't even articulate. It's so heavenly.
You're exactly correct. It's because you're home. You're now home. Okay.
Yeah.
As a human, you spent as a sapien, you spent 300,000 years evolving on this specific continent. So when you return here again, this is your actual ancestral home. And so the sounds of the birds, the smells of Africa, the smells of the trees, or even the rain falling on the dry dirt, the sound of an elephant or the sound of a baboon shouting, all of those things reawaken your senses, okay? And that reawakens our soul, because essentially all of our hearts beat for Africa.
What a perfect ending.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Devin.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am in the most beautiful place on planet Earth. I'm in Pafuri at Kruger National Park. I'm sitting next to Devin Myers, who is one of the top guides in the world from African-born safaris. And we're about to do an interview to basically give you an idea how you could take a walking tour and feel really, really safe. But most importantly, the reason why I'm here is that I believe in the animals, the conservation of the animals, and I believe if you're lucky enough, everybody's got to come to Africa. So, perfect. Oh my
Good.
God. Well done.
Thank